Welcome to this analysis presented by Franklin Hudson ISM. At the core of our overview lies the critical transformation of global theory into precise operational reality within the French market. While globalization is often superficially misunderstood as a force of cultural homogenization, advanced management research demonstrates the opposite. Cross-border operations require a shift from broad drafts to rigorous methodological precision. The institutional framework of Franklin Hudson ISM is built upon a global philosophy that does not merely manage diversity, but operationalizes it as a core asset. The thematic core of this masterclass focuses on systematically deconstructing cultural friction and transforming it into a sustainable strategic advantage in high-context markets. Where unprepared market entrants encounter insurmountable barriers, modern organizational science identifies specific levers for advanced market positioning. France serves as our primary case study, a highly structured implicit ecosystem where decoding implicit codes represents the definitive boundary between strategic failure and long-term market success. The academic portfolio of Franklin Hudson ISM. To equip executive leaders with the capacity to navigate these complex global landscapes, highly differentiated academic curricula are required. The IMBA program at Franklin Hudson ISM is precisely designed to enhance the macroeconomic and intercultural navigation capabilities of leaders operating within highly volatile environments. Complementing this is the research-oriented doctoral degree. The DBA translates empirical insights directly into practice-oriented, evidence-based solutions for executive decision-making. At the vanguard of academic research, the PhD program propels scholars to generate groundbreaking contributions to both global academic discourse and corporate practice. This comprehensive portfolio is augmented by bespoke custom programs for corporate executives, which have been deployed across major global hubs, including Paris, New York, Shanghai, and Tokyo since 2002. This deliberate geographic footprint reflects the necessity of continuously validating and calibrating theoretical management models at the primary crossroads of the global economy. The empirical validity of these educational frameworks is demonstrated by the quantitative metrics of the Franklin Hudson ISM network. Comprising over 5,000 alumni representing more than 135 nationalities, the institution possesses a knowledge alliance deeply embedded within global industries. The geographic distribution exhibits a highly balanced global equilibrium. Europe leads with 30%, followed closely by the Americas and Africa at 28% each, while Asia accounts for 14%. A key indicator of the network's strategic decision-making authority is its professional maturity. Over 60% of the network is aged 40 and above, with 38% in the 40 to 49 cohort and 22% in the 50 to 59 bracket. These senior decision-makers operate primarily within highly complex core sectors, including finance at 18%, technology at 16%, consulting at 12%, and entrepreneurship at 11%. Furthermore, a 34% expatriate rate underscores the immense global mobility and cross-border agility defining this community. The structural stability of the Franklin Hudson ISM model rests upon 5 definitive pillars that function as an integrated framework. The first pillar, academic excellence, demands a precise equilibrium between rigorous theoretical frameworks and applied, real-world insights derived from multidisciplinary perspectives. This is supported by the second pillar, cultural diversity, which is viewed not as a passive moral posture, but as an active strategic tool designed to foster intense interaction across differing backgrounds and build systematic empathy. The third pillar establishes a truly global perspective, requiring the cultivation of worldly mindsets, continuous learning, and proactive trend scouting. Operationally, this architecture is sustained by active learning, characterized by small class sizes that drive an interactive, discussion-oriented discourse and cultivate critical thinking. The final pillar of innovation redefines executive education through flexible, progressive, and highly agile delivery models adapted to contemporary needs. To deeply comprehend global communication, management practitioners must master the specific case study of France. The French business ecosystem represents a highly structured environment that fundamentally challenges standardized, Anglo-centric corporate norms. The sociocultural reality demands a sophisticated grasp of formality, intellectual rigor, and a strict demarcation between public and private spheres. In contrast, international market entry is often undermined by the Western default bias, the flawed assumption that geographically close or economically integrated Western cultures operate under identical behavioral parameters. This is a severe strategic misconception. Informality and directness cannot be universally translated. The strategic objective of this Franklin Hudson ISM masterclass is to move far beyond superficial linguistic translation, establishing genuine behavioral adaptation while fully respecting the deeply entrenched institutional structures of the host nation. The context spectrum, Edward T. Hall's framework. The theoretical foundation of these behavioral variances is provided by Edward T. Hall's classic culture theory, specifically the high versus low context spectrum. This framework classifies cultures based on the proportion of information that is explicitly verbalized versus that which remains implicit within the communication environment. On one end, low context cultures, such as the United States, the United Kingdom, or Scandinavia, rely on explicit, direct, and highly elaborated communication. Meaning correlates almost entirely with the literal spoken word. Transparency and processing speed are prioritized. At the opposite end, France operates as a distinct high-context culture. Communication is inherently implicit, highly nuanced, and relational. True meaning is embedded within historical context, established hierarchies, and unwritten nonverbal codes. At this intersection, a critical friction point emerges. What an Anglo-American actor defines as clear and efficient, a French interlocutor often perceives as blunt, simplistic, or unrefined. Linguistic and hierarchical coding, tu versus vous. The operational manifestation of this high-context environment is clearly visible in the linguistic and hierarchical paradigms of French commerce. The tu paradigm is strictly reserved for informal, intimate, or entirely egalitarian social contexts. An unpremature introduction of this form within professional interactions is rigorously rejected as presumptuous or manipulative. Conversely, the vous paradigm forms the unyielding structural foundation of professional communication. It is deliberately deployed to acknowledge and preserve institutional boundaries. This structural rigidity is further reinforced by the significant weight attached to academic and professional titles, such as engineer, doctor, or maître. These are not merely descriptive labels, but essential markers of expertise that demand recognition. Attempts to bypass this via modern startup aesthetics often lead to the Club Med fallacy. While tu is adopted superficially, the rigid hierarchical power axes remain fully intact beneath the surface. The architecture of trust. Affective versus cognitive anchoring. A deeper sociological analysis reveals a fundamental divergence in the very architecture of trust building. In Anglo-American business paradigms, affective trust tends to dominate. It is generated rapidly through surface-level informality, emotional affinity, and the outward signaling of team alignment. The French paradigm, however, is strictly anchored in cognitive trust. Here, trust is constructed slowly, deliberately, and empirically, demanding verifiable proofs of professional competence, flawless logical reasoning, and long-term behavioral consistency. Consequently, the strategic distance maintained by French business partners must never be misinterpreted as emotional coldness or hostility. It represents the necessary, respectful boundary required for professional trust to mature securely. The sequence is immutable. Personal rapport and affective closeness are the late rewards for proven intellectual excellence, never the starting point of an initial negotiation. Feedback mechanisms and the French esprit critique. When evaluating performance, communication systems clash methodically. The American feedback model prioritizes direct, actionable statements, yet deliberately packages them within an interpersonal compliment sandwich to protect individual emotions while driving operational action. In sharp contrast, French professional culture is governed by the esprit critique, the intellectual art of structured contradiction. A robust, highly logical debate is not merely tolerated, it is actively expected and viewed as a primary indicator of professional engagement and intellectual respect. It is never interpreted as a personal assault. However, delivering direct criticism in this environment requires a specific feedback buffer. It must be thoroughly supported by deep context, airtight causal chains, and Cartesian logic. During the final phase of defense, practitioners must expect their ideas to be rigorously challenged. Defending one's stance logically is the ultimate proof of credibility. Conversational dynamics and the linear discourse. Conversational dynamics in France follow the strict laws of a linear performance. Every articulated idea claims an inherent right to its full arc. It must be permitted to unfold, expand, dialectically pivot, and land precisely without external disruption or interjection. Within this framework, the role of silence undergoes a scientific reevaluation. Long pauses are not awkward, empty conversational vacuums, but represent active, highly productive periods of cognitive reflection. Silence signals precise listening and profound respect for the speaker's argument. This creates a severe active listening disconnect. The common Anglo-American habit of continuous verbal affirmations, such as or right, intended to signal ongoing support, is frequently perceived in France as a disruptive and irritating running commentary. In a structured debate, interrupting breaks the intellectual flow, transforming a duel of ideas into a primitive clash of egos. Sociocultural barriers, spheres of identity and regulations. The separation between distinct life domains is deeply rooted in the institutional fabric of France. The concept of separate spheres of identity enforces an uncompromising boundary between an individual's professional persona and their private existence. Consequently, professional small talk strictly avoids deeply personal topics. Breaching this boundary immediately triggers suspicion rather than camaraderie. This sociocultural norm is reinforced at the macroeconomic level by rigid formal labor regulations, such as the legally codified right to disconnect, which insulates employees from the obligation to engage with professional communications outside contractual hours. This structural pacing culminates in the institutionalized August shutdown, a national period of synchronized rest. Attempting to schedule critical meetings, product launches, or major negotiations during this month reveals an absolute ignorance of market realities and is strategically ineffective. Epistolary standards in digital correspondence, such as everyday email communication, these structural requirements remain unyielding. While British and American emails adhere to an efficiency bias, characterized by extreme brevity, informal salutations, and rapid, perfunctory acknowledgments, the French business community frequently interprets this approach as abrupt, discourteous, or dismissive. French correspondence requires a specific rhetorical runway. Formal salutations and elaborate sign-offs are mandatory structural components. The precise protocol demands opening with a formal Madame, Monsieur, followed by a detailed contextual framing before the actual request is articulated. The email must then be concluded with standardized, highly polite formulas, such as Je vous remercie par avance, followed by the classic cordialement. This investment of time is the necessary tribute required to construct sustainable business relationships without risking silent resentment. Digital sovereignty and the evolution from SEO to GEO. Turning our attention to France's modern digital landscape, global digital credibility does not automatically convert across borders. In the era of artificial intelligence, a major paradigm shift is occurring from traditional search engine optimization, SEO, toward generative engine optimization, GEO. Brands must now be optimized so that generative AI models preferentially cite them, necessitating a high density of premium earned media. Crucially, these algorithms heavily prioritize highly authoritative, localized French sources, such as Le Monde or Le Monde Informatique. Furthermore, French consumers and B2B decision-makers demand proactive transparency regarding digital ethics, strict data sovereignty, and localized cloud infrastructures. Building trust within the modern digital sphere is no longer a matter of mere reach. It requires an exact alignment with localized, culturally nuanced frameworks of technological trust. The comparative matrix, US-UK default versus French approach. In synthesis, the structural causality of these communication models can be mapped via a comparative matrix, contrasting the Anglo-American default with the French masterclass framework. Examining time orientation, the American mantra, "time is money," stands opposed to the French concept of time as a gift, highly rigid regarding punctual arrival, yet entirely fluid during the intellectual phases of discussion. The architecture of trust shifts from rapid, effective relationship building to slow, cognitively validated competency verification. Corporate decision-making also exhibits fundamental divergence. While the US and UK rely on agile, flat organizational hierarchies and the principle of rapid trial and error, France utilizes a centralized, top-down process characterized by high risk aversion toward any strategy lacking rigorous, logical justification. In the flow of communication, direct, overlapping, low-context behaviors clash with highly structured, non-interruptive, high-context protocols. At the conclusion of this methodological analysis stands the operational synthesis within the four-quadrant cultural intelligence model as taught by Franklin Hudson, ISM. The process initiates with metacognitive CQ, the conscious awareness that one's default communication style is merely a localized cultural artifact, never a universal baseline. This forms the basis for cognitive CQ, the structural acquisition of specific knowledge regarding the mechanics of tu versus vous, the right to disconnect, and the functions of the esprit critique. Motivational CQ provides the genuine interest and psychological resilience required to engage with this demanding, highly intellectual environment without taking rigorous debate personally. The ultimate objective is behavioral CQ, the absolute flexibility to adaptively alter communication protocols, extending pauses, utilizing formal prose, and engaging in structured debate to transform cultural differences into distinct strategic advantages. Thank you very much for your attention.